They accused you of something you didn't do. You stayed silent, thinking your calm would speak louder than their chaos. But all you got was judged, labeled, misunderstood, and worse, you lost opportunities, relationships, respect. Why? Because in this world, silence isn't always strength. Sometimes, silence is guilt. And never defending yourself? It's not noble. It's naive. We've been told that powerful people never explain themselves, that defending is a sign of insecurity, that Machiavelli himself warned us, the moment you defend, you lose power. But what if I told you that's only half the truth? Because sometimes, when timed right, delivered right, defending yourself isn't weakness, it's a weapon. Let's decode the line between power and self-sabotage. When is staying silent smart? And when does it become self-erasure? Most people avoid defending themselves not because they're stoic, but because they're scared. Scared they won't be believed. Scared of escalating conflict. Scared of being seen as emotional, weak, or dramatic. So we default to silence and call it maturity. But here's what most people don't realize. Your silence doesn't always make you look powerful. It makes them louder. It gives the other side full control of the narrative. And in a world driven by optics, not just facts, perception becomes reality. Think about the school kid wrongly accused of cheating, the coworker blamed for a failed project, the man falsely labeled toxic in a social media smear. If they don't speak, they're remembered only by the lie. Because the brain doesn't store silence, it stores stories, and the loudest story wins. So the reason we often don't defend isn't because we know our worth. It's because we've been conditioned to believe silence is safer than truth. But safety is not always strength. Sometimes, it's slow destruction. Su kak beat, jua fong tu iu dui, va fong tu kachin luk. Here's the turning point. There's a difference between emotional defending and strategic defending. One is reactive. The other is calculated. One comes from fear. The other from clarity. Let's break this down. Emotional defending is when someone hits your ego and you respond instantly, over-explaining, oversharing, hoping to be understood. It's chaotic, exhausting, and often backfires. But strategic defending? It's rooted in timing, precision, and posture. It's when you stay silent while emotions are high, but strike with calm truth when it matters most. It's not about convincing everyone. It's about planting doubt in the minds of those who matter. It's not about proving innocence to the mob. It's about reclaiming your own narrative. And that is power. So before you decide to never defend yourself, ask, am I protecting my peace? Or, am I handing away my power? Let's make one thing clear. There is a moment when silence is no longer peacekeeping. It's surrender. That moment is when your reputation is being shaped in rooms you're not in, when people are telling your story without you in it. And if you think your silence will speak for itself, it won't. Because the modern world doesn't read silence as grace. It reads it as guilt. You know this already. You've seen it happen to people. The coworker who got blamed for something they didn't do and said nothing. The friend who was lied about and stayed above the drama. The creator who was accused of something online and thought silence would clear the air. What happened to all of them? They disappeared. Not literally, but their reputation, their identity, their presence in the collective mind, it vanished. Because here's the dark psychology of modern perception. The story that gets repeated becomes the truth. It doesn't matter if it's accurate, it matters if it's loud. The brain doesn't store silence, it stores stories. And when you give people a blank canvas, they'll paint you with the ugliest colors they can imagine, especially when you're not in the room to say otherwise. And here's the worst part. If you wait too long to speak, your truth will sound like damage control. It won't be seen as clarity. It'll be seen as desperation. Because in the perception economy, timing is everything. So when should you defend yourself? When your identity is being hijacked. When people are pinning motives on you that were never yours. When they're twisting your words into weapons. When your silence gives birth to a version of you that's easier to hate than understand. That is not the time to stay calm and hope for the best. That is the time to step into the room, even if metaphorically, and say one sentence that rewrites the story. Not for the mob, not for the trolls, but for the people who still think. The ones who still listen. You don't owe an explanation to everyone, but you owe the truth to your legacy. Because if you don't defend your name when it matters, you may never get it back. Let's talk about something deeper. Something personal. Because defending yourself isn't always about clearing your name. Sometimes, it's about teaching the world how to treat you. Every time you stay silent when someone disrespects you, you're training them to keep doing it. Every time you let someone talk over you, blame you, or twist your words without response, you're telling them, "This is okay. You can do this to me again." And the scary part? They will. Not because they're evil, but because human behavior is conditioned. When there's no resistance, people push further. Not out of malice, but out of momentum. It's how systems of power form. How toxic bosses get away with manipulating employees. How families shame someone into silence. How friends talk behind your back, then smile to your face, because they know you won't stop them. And over time, what started as being the bigger person becomes a life of being the quieter one. Your boundaries dissolve. Your voice fades. And your identity? It becomes a collection of other people's assumptions, stitched together by your silence. Here's the truth no one tells you. If you don't defend your space, someone else will occupy it. And they won't decorate it with kindness. They'll fill it with control, convenience, and whatever suits them. Not you. You think you're choosing peace by not responding? But peace without respect is submission, and over time that submission turns into resentment, not toward them, but toward yourself. Because deep down, you know you're betraying something sacred, your own self-worth. So when should you speak up? When your silence is no longer keeping the peace, but costing your power. Even a single sentence, said calmly, firmly, and without apology, can reset the dynamic. Not through aggression, not through anger, but through clarity. Because boundaries don't always need walls. Sometimes they just need a voice. Yours. There's a new kind of manipulation rising. It doesn't scream. It doesn't insult. It doesn't even look hostile. Instead, it wraps itself in soft words, polished values, and a fake smile. It pretends to care about the greater good. And then, it demands your silence. You'll hear things like, "You should be the bigger person. Let's not create more drama. Don't make people uncomfortable. A good man doesn't need to respond." Sounds noble, right? But here's the sinister twist. It's not about morality. It's about control. It's about using moral pressure to shame you into compliance, to make you feel that speaking your truth is somehow selfish, that defending yourself is immature, that having boundaries means you lack compassion. But think deeply for a second. Who benefits when you stay silent? Not the truth. Not your well-being. Not your values. The only ones who win are those who get to reshape the story without resistance. Let's be brutally honest. Some people don't want peace. They want quiet. You're quiet. They want to say what they want, do what they want, and take what they want, without having to face the mirror of your voice. So they weaponize virtue. They throw terms like humility, kindness, and maturity at you, not to elevate you, but to mute you. Because once you internalize that speaking up makes you less noble, you become manageable, controllable, silent. But true morality, it doesn't demand your silence. It creates space for your dignity. So when should you speak? When your values are being hijacked to keep you small. You're not less spiritual because you draw a line. You're not less evolved because you don't tolerate lies. You're not less kind because you say, "That's not what happened, and I won't let that version define me." In fact, that is the most radical act of integrity you can perform in a world obsessed with image. Because truth, real truth, doesn't need to scream, but it does need to speak. And sometimes, that voice has to be yours. You've been misunderstood. You feel the urge to explain everything, the context, the tone, the intention, the backstory. You want to lay it all out, from A to Z, in hopes that once people see the full picture, they'll finally understand. But let me tell you something hard. The more you explain, the less they believe you. Why? Because over-explaining doesn't build trust. It signals desperation. It doesn't say, "Here's the truth." It says, "Please accept me." And that's the problem. You've already lost power the moment your words turn into a performance for approval. In the real world, where perception matters more than purity, the person who explains too much looks guilty, even when they're innocent. That's why powerful people don't explain. They reframe. They don't beg for understanding. They control the lens through which others see the issue. Let me show you the difference. Explanation mode. "I swear I didn't mean it that way. You misunderstood. What I was really trying to say was this, and here's what led up to it. And I would never do that because I always..." Powerless, defensive, draining. Reframe mode. "That interpretation isn't aligned with who I am. I won't argue it, but I also won't let it define me." Short, calm, firm, unshakable. It signals, "I'm not here to debate. I'm not afraid to be misunderstood. I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to exist with clarity." This is not arrogance. This is discipline. You're not shutting down conversation. You're shutting down distortion. Because here's the secret. You don't need to correct every version of you that lives in someone else's head. You only need to own the version you stand for. And that means dropping the emotional urge to be liked or believed and rising into the strategic clarity of being respected. Because respect doesn't come from explanation. It comes from presence, and presence is felt strongest when your words are few, but your boundaries are loud. In a world that's constantly shouting, there is rare power in a person who only speaks once, but speaks with such clarity, it shakes the room. You don't need to argue. You don't need to convince. You don't need to repeat yourself 5 different ways. What you need is a single, grounded response that carries weight. Because here's what no one tells you. Repetition makes you look uncertain. Every time you say it again, in a new email, in another meeting, in a follow-up text, you're not reinforcing your truth. You're watering it down. People don't respect a voice that begs. They respect a voice that decides. Let's paint the picture. Imagine someone publicly accuses you of having bad intentions. Your instinct might be to overreact, post a long thread, write paragraphs, send voice notes explaining yourself from every angle. But power doesn't do that. Power says this: that claim doesn't reflect who I am. I don't live for public approval. I live by internal truth. I won't drag this out, but I also won't let it shape me. That's all I'll say. Period. You didn't scream. You didn't justify. You didn't break down in public to win sympathy. You made a statement. Then you stood by it, in silence. And that silence? It's no longer weakness. It becomes amplification. Because the echo of a calm, final word is louder than the noise of 1,000 back and forths. People remember certainty. They forget debate. Think of the great leaders, thinkers, icons. When attacked, they didn't respond to every rumor. They crafted one line, delivered it with spine, and moved on. Not because they were arrogant, but because they understood one thing. The second time you defend yourself, people stop listening to you. They start analyzing why you keep defending. So speak once, with intention, with clarity. Then walk forward. Your energy is too valuable to keep rehearsing the same defense. The right people heard you the first time. The wrong ones were never really listening anyway. Let's come full circle. We started with silence. We questioned its meaning. We saw how it can destroy you if you use it to hide. But here's the truth. Silence isn't weakness. It's just misunderstood. Because silence, when chosen intentionally, is not surrender. It's strategy. The difference is simple. Silence that comes from fear is avoidance. Silence that comes after clarity is command. You've said what needed to be said, once, with calm, with truth. Now, you don't need to say it again, because the strongest voice isn't the one that keeps repeating itself, it's the one that knows when to stop. And in that stopping, you reclaim something priceless. Inner authority. You're no longer trying to win people over. You're no longer chasing their understanding. You're no longer asking permission to be heard. You are anchored in your own truth. And that's when silence becomes sharp. It becomes presence. It becomes that invisible energy that walks into a room before you do. The kind that makes people choose their words carefully, because they know you won't argue, you won't beg, you won't perform. But if pushed too far, you will respond. Not emotionally, not chaotically, not impulsively, but precisely. One sentence, one frame, then silence. That's not just power, that's maturity. So no, you don't have to defend yourself to everyone, and you don't have to explain your soul to the shallow. But when the moment is right, when your name, your values, or your identity are being reshaped by lies, speak once, speak well, then let the echo do the rest. Because in the end, your voice isn't just a sound. It's a boundary. It's a shield. It's a signal to the world. You may not agree with me. You may not even like me, but you will not rewrite me. If this message spoke to something you've been carrying quietly, if you've been gaslighted, mislabeled, or made to feel like defending yourself was weakness, then maybe it's time to reclaim that voice, not to be loud, not to fight everyone, but to stand firm in the one version of you the world cannot take away, the one you define. If you felt that shift, hit the like button, not for the algorithm, but as a signal to yourself, I won't stay small for the comfort of others. And if you want more videos like this, stories, strategies, and psychology that help you stay grounded in your power, subscribe. This is just the beginning.